If the Buffalo Bills offense is going to take a step in 2025, there are 6 metrics that must improve. I'm going to break those down for you today on Locked On Bills.
You are Locked On Bills, your daily Buffalo Bills podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Bills Mafia? It's Joe Marino, author of the Herd Mentality Substack, co-host of the Locked On NFL Scouting Podcast, co-host of the NFL First Read Podcast, and I'm your host of Locked On Bills. Want to thank you for making Locked On Bills your first listen every day, and a big welcome and shout out to our everydayers. You know who you are. Those of you who never miss a single episode, I appreciate y'all being here very, very much. I'd also like to invite you to subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Well, folks, welcome in. I want to spend today's conversation with you discussing 6 different metrics about the 2024 Buffalo Bills offense that I think are critical to improve in 2025 if this offense is going to take a step forward. And so today we're going to do this for the offensive side of the football. Tomorrow, we're going to do this for the defensive side of the football. But I want to start by acknowledging that this offense last year was really, really good. It was exceptional. You're talking about the number 3 offense in the NFL in terms of EPA, number 3 in passing EPA, number 2 in rushing EPA, number 2 in scoring, number 2 in red zone touchdown percentage, number 7 in third down conversion rate. And remember, that started off very slowly, finishes in the top 7. And it's also the offense that scored the most touchdowns in history for the franchise. The 2024 Buffalo Bills offense has quite the claim and resume as the best offense in franchise history, potentially. You can make a strong case for it. And so keep that in mind, because I'm going to get nitpicky here. I'm going to, bring up some areas that growth is needed, but I am right off the bat acknowledging how good this offense was. But if we want it to be even better in 2025, I've got 6 things that I think need to be better. And so in these 6 different categories, I want to discuss the numbers. I want to talk about the why behind the numbers, and then get very specific on how those numbers can improve in 2025. Let's start with the amount of running back targets in the passing game. The Bills were exceptional at throwing the football to running backs in 2024. They just didn't do it very often. Let me give you some numbers here. In 2024, when the Buffalo Bills targeted running backs in the passing game compared to other teams targeting running backs in the passing game, the Bills were number 1 in EPA per pass, number 1 in yards per attempt, number 1 in passer rating, number 1 in adjusted net yards per attempt, number 1 in passing touchdowns, but 20th in targets. And despite being 20th in targets, they were 3rd in yards. Only 74 targets last year for running backs. And that is a number that I hope goes up significantly. I'd love it to double. I'd love for 150 targets to go to running backs next year. And a benefit to getting the running backs more involved would be Josh Allen's completion percentage. Josh had a great year. Don't get me wrong. NFL MVP, and rightfully so. But his completion percentage was pretty average, 63.6%. In fact, that's 22nd in the NFL last year. Meanwhile, all 3 of the running backs, James Cook, Ty Johnson, Ray Davis, they all averaged over 8.3 yards after the catch per reception. Good things happened when the Bills threw the ball to running backs. I hope they do it more in 2025. So why? Why were the Bills' targets for running backs only 74, 20th in the NFL? Well, I think number 1, it's Josh Allen's style. He's got bigger eyes elsewhere. Josh Allen wants to make big plays down the field. He's a touchdown to check down style player. And you love that. And you don't want Josh Allen to approach the game any differently. But I do think there's always going to be a bit of an appetite that you're going to want more running back targets just stylistically because of the way that Josh Allen plays the game. I'll also say this, that the Bills' screen game last year was really good, but it was pretty much a Khalil Shakir screen game that sometimes featured Dalton Kincaid and rarely featured running backs. And so when you think about the overall slice of pie that running backs get in the passing game, a lot of that's tied to the screen game, and the Bills really don't have a running back screen game. It's really evolved, but it's about Khalil Shakir and it's about Dalton Kincaid, not really running backs at all. So I think that's probably at its core why the Bills were lower in terms of overall volume of targets to running backs in the passing game. How can this improve? Well, I think you could look to have more passing calls where running backs are earlier options in terms of the progression. Have that running back available earlier in the progression, and perhaps you get more targets funneled to running backs. I think you can involve your running backs more out of the slot. The Bills, I think one of the great things about all three of their backs, Davis, Johnson, Cook, is they're all very talented pass catchers, and they all have an exciting route running profile, especially James Cook. Last year, James Cook got 1 target from the slot. 1. Ray Davis got 0. And I think Ty Johnson had a few, but he was like 22nd in the NFL in total targets for running backs in the slot. So I think that's a great way to force matchups. If you get teams in man coverage and you put your running back out in the slot, you're going to get probably a linebacker on top of them. It's a great look for you. So I'd be willing to tap into more of that. And I think another area that you could have some more targets go to running backs is by incorporating them more in the play action check down game. When Josh Allen checked the ball down to a running back on a play action call, good things happen. He was 14 of 16 for 137 yards. Number 1 in the NFL in yards per attempt at 8.56 on play action check downs to running backs. Number 2 in passer rating at 102.3. Another area where good things happen when Josh Allen threw the ball to running backs. So I think it starts with recognizing the success that existed there, and then from there, putting more of an emphasis on there. And I think with the maximum stress that Josh Allen as a player puts on a defense, they can't take it all away. And when Josh Allen's willing to get the ball out of his hands and into the hands of running backs and let them go to work, good things happen because of the overall stress that Josh Allen's skill set puts on a defense. And I thought this was Josh Allen's best year of including the running backs and willing to take the profits. But I think there's a little bit more meat on the bone. And that's an area that I think this offense can emphasize more and grow, help lead to growth in 2025 to make a great offense even better. So number 1, running back targets in the passing game. Have 5 more metrics to dive into, including some vertical passing metrics that we'll break down here on the other side of it. Folks, be sure to stick with me. You ever look at your bank account and wonder, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment, it's easy to lose track. That's where Monarch Money comes in. Your personal CFO giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just another budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center where you can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place so you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. The insight, folks, they are surprising. When I started using Monarch, I realized just how much I was spending on food delivery. Now I budget smarter and I save more. Plus, the convenience is awesome. Instead of juggling multiple apps, you can use Monarch to check your finances, track spending, and even plan for those long-term goals. And it's easy to collaborate. Managing your money with a partner is smoother than ever. You can track shared and personal accounts, set goals, and stay on the same page without the stress. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. All right, let's talk about the next metric that I think needs to be better in 2025. And really, it's the vertical passing metrics. The Bills' offense was really good. Josh Allen was really good. The vertical passing numbers were downright bad. a bottom tier vertical passing offense. And when we talk vertical passing, we mean targets 20 yards or more down the field. Let me tell you where the Bills offense ranked last year on vertical passes. Completion percentage, 24th. Yards per attempt, 26th. Passing touchdowns, 31st. Passer rating, 28th. Catchable throw rate, 25th. EPA per pass, 20th. But dropback percentage, 5th. So you're very poor. All these metrics are poor. You're talking pretty much bottom 25% of the league across the board. But you threw the ball down the field the 5th highest rate of any team. Not great, right? So if you're going to do something at a high clip, you need to be good at it, and the Bills were not. So why weren't they good at throwing the ball down the field? Why were these numbers so poor? Well, I think it starts with a lack of vertical receiving talent. The Bills really didn't have down the field options, field stretchers, guys that really could win down the field. They brought in Amari Cooper to help with that, and he did to an extent, but not in a volume role, and obviously his injury didn't help, and incorporating a target like that in the middle of the year is challenging. MVS was your answer that you went with to start the year, and he lasted, a handful of games before he was released? You didn't have vertical receiving talent. And on top of that, Josh Allen's ball placement down the field was poor, even by his own standards. If you look at Josh Allen's year-over-year vertical passing metrics, 2024 was his worst year since 2020. So like the span of time where Josh Allen became this elite quarterback, 2020 through 2024, his worst year in terms of EPA per attempt, passer rating, completion percentage, yards per attempt, touchdown passes, completion percentage over expectation, and catchable ball rate on deep throws. It was Josh Allen's worst year throwing the ball down the field. And I guess the good news is that it was an outlier year because the other years were much better. Last year was not. A lot of that has to do with a lack of vertical receiving talent. And you're talking about the hardest thing to establish chemistry is down the field throws, and you turned over your whole wide receiver core outside of Khalil Shakir, who's not really a vertical receiver. So you can understand it. There's plenty of context and reasons why, but the troubling part is that you still did it on 14% of your passing plays, the 5th highest mark in the league. So how can the vertical passing offense improve in 2025? I think that starts with Elijah Moore and Josh Palmer. Your two additions here. And those are players that have very good separation metrics down the field. Those are immediately your best two down the field receivers, Elijah Moore and Josh Palmer. So the two things that you did to add to your receiver core is directly connected to vertical passing, and those guys should absolutely help. Number two is improving chemistry with Dalton Kincaid and Keon Coleman, which we will talk about later today. Those are players that are young and had big roles. You know, Keon Coleman, as the first pick the Bills made in the draft, comes in and he plays the highest percentage of snaps of any receiver on the team. Dalton Kincaid, year 1 to year 2, major jump in targets per route run and depth of target. Like, there was a lot more on his plate. So you didn't have vertical receiving talent. Then the two guys where you think maybe that could help, they had a lot on their plate and really new roles for them. Another area that I think can help the vertical passing metrics improve, which we'll talk about here in just a moment, is having more play action passing. The Bills did not run play action passes at as high of a rate as I'd like them to, and those are great opportunities to work the ball down the field. So if this offense gets more explosive passing plays through air yards, boy, it's going to be a lot for defenses to deal with. So these vertical passing metrics, I'm not asking the Bills to be the best vertical passing offense, but can they be middle of the pack as opposed to bottom 25%? That'd be nice. That would be nice. The next thing I do want to get into is play action percentage. Josh Allen's percentage of passes that were play action, 21.8%. That's 24th in the NFL. Not a very high volume play action passer, Josh Allen. Now, unlike what I talked about with vertical passing and there being a high frequency but low success, or even the running back targets where there's low frequency and high success, with play action, the Bills have low frequency and high success. This is more like the running backs thing. Like, do it more. You're good at it. Do it more. Josh Allen, number 4 in EPA per play action pass last year in the NFL. And if you look at the elite tier of play action passing offenses in terms of EPA, it's the Rams, Packers, Ravens, and Bills. They're like in a category of their own, way better than anyone else. But the Bills were 24th in frequency, despite being elite when the results are calculated and they had the chance to run play action passes. And year over year, Josh Allen is consistently excellent at play action passing. So I want to see that uptick significantly. I want Josh Allen to be around 30% of dropbacks being play action passes. So why was Josh Allen's play action percentage lower? I think the new wide receivers matter a ton here. And if you look at Josh Allen's play action passing metrics in 2023, so many of those targets went to Stephon Diggs and Gabe Davis. And those numbers, those splits with play action were phenomenal, both Gabe and Steph. And you got to think about conceptually what play action passing is. You're faking a run. Josh Allen's turning his back to the defense. When he gets his head around, that picture could look so many different ways compared to what he thought it was going to be when he turned around. And now all of a sudden you're turning your back to the defense, and out in front of you is a menu of receivers that are all brand new, as opposed to, guys that he had a bunch of years with in Davis and Diggs. So I think the new wide receivers impacted things there. I also think that the Bills and their desire to run 5-man protection schemes kind of complicates your play action game. The Bills want to maximize their eligible receivers. On any given play, you can only have 5 eligible receivers. So you have 5 offensive linemen, a quarterback, and 5 eligible receivers. The Bills do not want to keep eligible receivers into block. They want them out in routes to give as many options to Josh Allen as possible. The trade-off there is, well, you have less blockers. And if you run play action and you're going to fake a run and you're going to turn Josh Allen's back to the defense, you've got to be able to protect. And a lot of times it's being willing to protect with a 6 or a 7-man surface as opposed to a 5. So I think that matters quite a bit. The last thing I'll talk about in terms of why the play action percentage was a little bit low outside of the new receivers and the Bills' desire to have 5-man protection schemes is, for as good as the Bills' offensive line was last year and is, they gave up a decent amount of pressure. Josh Allen was the 18th most pressured quarterback in the league. Now, he was the least sacked. We'll talk about that in a moment. But he still faced a good amount of pressure, particularly from the middle 3. And if you think about that middle 3 of McGovern at center, Torrance at right guard, Edwards at left guard, that was a new trio, right? McGovern switched over from left guard to center, Edwards into the lineup, Torrance's first year next to McGovern. There were communication breakdowns early in the season. And ultimately, Josh Allen had an all-time great year in handling pressure and not allowing that to turn into sacks. In fact, only 8.2% of the pressure that Josh Allen faced last year turned into a sack. It's a crazy good number. But I think that complicates your play-action passing game, where you got to be choosy when you're going to have Josh Allen turn his back to the defense while you've been a little bit shaky with some of your pass pro, especially in the middle 3, and you need that pocket depth to hold up so that Josh Allen can get his head around and have a chance to find somewhere to throw the football. So how can the play action rate improve? Well, step 1 is call it more. Call more play action passes. Do the thing Josh Allen is great at more. I think number 2 is having better separators and guys with better chemistry with Josh Allen. So Elijah Moore, Josh Palmer, the separators. All the other guys returning and having better chemistry with Josh Allen. And then number 3 is allowing less pressure in general. Like I said, the Bills were 18th in pressure rate. If the Bills become a little bit more sure there, and of course Torrance, good overall player, but he can be stressed in pass protection by quicker interior rushers to stay square. If the Bills can take a step there, I think there'll be more confidence from Joe Brady to call those play action passes. So play action pass rate, something I want to see go up. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about run looks and a couple of individual players that I think there's specific parts of their game that I think metrically can improve and make the offense better. We'll get into that here in just a moment. Folks, be sure to stick with me. All right, folks, welcome back. The next thing that I want to see metrically improve next year, or this year, I guess, 2025, is the overall run looks. Let me explain. Last season, the Bills ran 37% of their runs into light boxes. Light boxes mean 6 or fewer defenders in the box. Didn't happen very often, only 26th in terms of frequency in the NFL. However, the Bills had 27.2% of their runs into stacked boxes. A stacked box is 8 or more defenders in the box. That's the third highest rate. So you're very rarely running the ball into light boxes, and you're very frequently running the ball into stacked boxes. And Football 101 tells you that running the football is often how many blockers do you have versus how many box defenders do they have. Whichever one has an advantage, whichever one's usually +1 is where you're going to have success. And the Bills did not have the numbers on their side very often. Now, there's some good news here. The Bills were by far the best team in the NFL last year in terms of EPA running into light boxes. By far, like a commanding lead, like significantly the best team in the NFL last year running the ball into light boxes. And they were also very good at running it into stacked boxes, which is important if you're going to do it at the third highest rate in the league. Number 4 in EPA per rush into stacked boxes. So they were still very good at it. But if you can get that to switch up a little bit more where you have a higher percentage of runs into light boxes, boy, things can really take off. So why did the Bills have these splits, these metric splits when it comes to running the football? Well, I think part of it is a consequence of having condensed formations. The Bills, talk about formational width. They're spread, right, where you're going to push your end man on each side of the formation out towards the numbers, out towards the sideline. The Bills ran a lot of condensed sets where everything was kind of a tight. And the Bills used a lot of heavy personnel, the 6th offensive lineman, 2 tight ends, 2 running backs. The Bills do these things. And so when you have heavier personnel in condensed formations, you're going to invite heavier box counts. So it's a little bit of a consequence to the structure of the Bills offense. I think also the Bills had some leads, right? So there's some game scripts that put the Bills in a situation where they're way ahead. Everybody knows they're going to run the ball, and the Bills are still going to run the ball because they want the game to be over. And I think Josh Allen is your quarterback, and what he can do as a runner is going to invite the defense to have a little bit more attention on box count defenders. So how can it improve? I think the number one thing is having teams be more afraid of your wide receiver talent and the explosive elements of the passing offense. I think that goes hand in hand with what we talked about with the vertical passing game. Teams need to be more afraid of what the Bills have at wide receiver and the down the field passing game so that they're less willing to crowd the box. Make them really, really uncomfortable with whether or not they're going to load up the box and try to stop the run, or if they're going to play coverage and hope they can stop the run. Improved receiving talent will go a long way here, assuming it clicks and assuming the Bills can get the down the field stuff going. The last 2 things I want to talk about are related to players. And the first player is Keon Coleman. And the metric that I think is most important to change is his average depth of target. Last year, Keon Coleman's average depth of target was 15.8. I want that to come down by a few yards. 15.8 yards average depth of target was 6th highest in the NFL among receivers that ran at least 290 routes. 103 receivers ran at least 290 routes. Keon Coleman, when targeted, had the 6th highest average depth of target. And there's a troubling metric story to explain such a high average depth of target. So as I mentioned, number 6 in average depth of target. Keon Coleman was 100 out of 103 in catch rate. so lowest catch rate, nearly the lowest catch rate in the NFL. Number 4, Keon Coleman's number 4 in yards after catch per reception. Again, what I want this to come down. I want more short throws for Keon Coleman. Number 4 in yards after catch per reception. Number 1 in yards after contact per reception. 5th in missed tackles forced per reception. Right? More reason to give him the ball a little bit sooner. Let him create. He's a good yards after catch player. Keon Coleman was only 5 of 12 in contested situations last year. That's 75th in the NFL. So not a very, I know that's kind of what he's supposed to be as a contested catch receiver. Wasn't very good at it last year. And he was 91st in catchable target percentage. So all of this, when you tell this story, he's got an average depth of target of far down the field, but he's a very good yards after catch player. He's a very inefficient player down the field. He's not very good in contested situations. And he's, ultimately not a very good separator, which we'll talk about here in a second. There's no reason for that to be what he majors in, is down the field passing targets, which he did. Last year, Keon Coleman, 27.4% of his routes were go routes. Straight line, run down the field. The highest percentage of overall routes in the NFL last year that were go routes ran by Keon Coleman. But he had the lowest separation score on go routes. According to the Fantasy Points data suite, he had the 11th lowest route win rate on go routes. It's not effective. It's not good. He's not good at it. And that directly correlates to the high average depth of target. The Bills have got to get Keon Coleman established with short to intermediate targets that are going to make those down the field opportunities better. Right now, teams are unafraid of Keon Coleman stretching the field, partly because they don't do enough to get him involved on short to intermediate throws. So why is all this, right? That's what we want to ask ourselves. Why? I wonder how much of his role was simplified. Even when he was before the injury, it's a young man. He's 21 years old, only his second year full-time in football. Maybe his role was pretty simplified and they didn't want to ask him to run that many different routes. Plus, he had the injury. Now, the average depth of target jumped considerably post-injury. So before the injury, his average depth of target was 12.8. Post-injury, 18.2. When he came back, literally the only thing they asked him to do was run in a straight line down the field. And something that he obviously wasn't very effective at. Another reason why is I do think that the Bills needed someone to stretch the field and challenge defenses vertically. And Keon Coleman as a perimeter X receiver, they wanted to use that, try to set up some leverage opportunities down the field. And I think also, there's a Keon Coleman needs to improve as a route runner conversation to have here as well with his release package and how he stacks, right? Vertical receiving is not just about being able to run straight and run fast. There's nuance in how you get into your route, how you stack and get on top of defensive backs to create vertical leverage. There's more to it. You don't necessarily have to be blazing speed to be a good vertical receiver. There's so many other elements that are important there. I think Keon's got to develop that route running profile if he's going to be used like this down the field. So how can it improve? How can we get Keon Coleman's average depth of target to improve? Well, I think step one is his overall role expanding and the Bills gaining confidence in Keon's overall ability to help as a receiver, because that'll help open up those chances down the field, especially what we talked about post-injury when his ADOT jumped from 12.8 to 18.2, and then for Keon to improve as a route runner. But Keon Coleman can't be a goal ball merchant. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. He needs the rest of his profile to develop so that there's more stress that he individually as a player puts on a defense. So I want Keon Coleman's average depth of target to come down, and I think it'll tell a much better story about Keon Coleman. It'll tell a story that's very similar to the Keon Coleman we saw weeks 1 through 9 that people got excited about, not the one that quickly fell out of favor upon return from injury. And lastly, we'll talk a little bit about Dalton Kincaid. And I've gotten into this so many different times. But Dalton, the catchable target rate for Dalton Kincaid has to be better. Among the 41 NFL tight ends to run at least 200 routes in 2024, only 69% of Dalton Kincaid's targets were catchable, the lowest in the league. And when he was targeted 10 or more yards down the field, his catchable target rate was only 37%, obviously the lowest in the league. So why was this the case? Well, I think you had too much offensive turnover, which impacted Josh Allen's growth with Dalton Kincaid in year 2. All these things are different, right? You got 4 new receivers. You got a new primary backup running back. You got 2 new offensive line starters. Quarterback coach change. Like, I think that probably all impacted Josh Allen and Dalton Kincaid's opportunity to really develop chemistry in a year where Kincaid's role did shift. And I think the average depth of target there tells the story. In 2023, Kincaid's average depth of target was 6.5. In 2024 was 8.3, almost 2 more yards down the field. The Bills had a lot more on the plate of Dalton Kincaid to win down the field. And unfortunately, him and Josh just weren't on the same page. Only 37% of his targets, 10 or more yards on the field, were catchable. And then, of course, Dalton Kincaid's injuries as well played into this. I'm sure, this guy's got a bum knee, then he gets another bum knee. He had some, other issues throughout the course of the year. I'm sure that varied his pace and his speed and his quickness in and out of breaks. And, anything that's going to throw off the timing is going to matter. And, I think Josh and him were still trying to get on the same page, and getting on the same page when he doesn't have consistent athleticism available. So how can it improve? Well, I think number one is the overall stabilization of options around Josh Allen as there's more continuity this year. Instead of Josh Allen having to get on the same page with so many different guys, it's just Elijah Moore and Josh Palmer, as opposed to double that last year, triple that last year. And then, of course, just Josh Allen and Dalton Kincaid getting on the same page, establishing the chemistry, and that being the passing tandem that we were excited for it to be when he was a first-round pick in 2023. So there you have it, folks. 6 metrics that I want the Bills to be better at in 2025 for this offense to take a step. More running back targets, the overall vertical passing equation, the play action rate, I want that to jump. I want those run looks to be more favorable. I want Keon Coleman's average depth of target to come down. And I want for Dalton Kincaid's catchable target rate to be much higher. I look forward to doing this on the defensive side of the football. We had to kind of nitpick a little bit here, get very into the weeds to come up with the right stuff to really find growth areas for a great offense. Defense might not be so challenging. There's some pretty obvious areas where that's going to need to get better. And I'll give you the numbers to back that up for tomorrow's podcast. So don't miss anything. Make sure that you're subscribed. Would love it if you took a second to rate, review, and share the podcast. Have a great rest of your day. Go Bills. And I look forward to catching up with you again real soon.